We do have a lot of design systems out there such as Fluent Design System, Atlassian, Carbon Design System, MailChimp, Airbnb Design System, GitLab Pajamas, and many more. Regardless, the most popular design systems are material design and human interface guidelines. Hello, my name is Max. Welcome to Design Talk. Just like the name, this channel will talk mostly about UI, UX design and UX research. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification to know more about product design. We'll go over the key differences between iOS and Android for UX, UI designers. If you've already created an app for one platform, this is the majority of what you'll need to know to translate it for the other. However, these are only guidelines. Everything I'll say is different somewhere, including by Apple or Google. This is the case about translating iOS ideas to Android ideas and vice versa. First, top screen navigation. We'll begin at the top. Each platform has its own set of guidelines for what appears at the top of most screens. On iOS, the optional left action is almost always some sort of back. The page title is almost always present and begins large but gradually shrinks as the user scrolls with the header. The right page actions are optional and can be displayed as a single text action or a series of icon actions. The page title is positioned to the left on Android. If the page is a top-level page and the app has a hamburger button, it will appear there. If this page follows another sequentially, you can optionally add a back button. However, nothing is required to be present to the left of the page title. Second, primary navigation destinations. The main app destinations are shown as tabs across the bottom of iOS apps. There are in total 2 to 5 tabs. Size 10 font is used for the labels. They stand in for the primary objectives, or nouns, of the application. Any tab that represents the program's main function, such as adding a new photo in a photo-based app, is center-positioned. The final tab is any profile or settings-related tab. The main distinction between Android apps and other mobile platforms is how the same basic destinations are distributed more widely over the user interface, frequently between a hamburger button, a search bar, tabs, or a floating action button. Also take notice that Android has just adopted bottom navigation, which is comparable to iOS, so there may not be much of a difference at all. Thirdly, secondary navigation destinations. On iOS, navigational options that don't fit in the bottom tab bar can either be moved to the More tab or show up as actions at the top left or top right of other options. On Android, a hamburger button is used to open a side menu with a selection of secondary navigational destinations. Although Apple doesn't actively promote using the hamburger button, or using it in their default apps, many third-party iOS apps do, and you can choose to utilize it or not as you see fit. Avoiding anything that conceals crucial information is a good idea because the obvious solution always prevails. There are plenty ways of going back in iOS, such as press back action on top left of screen, swipe right from left edge of screen, press done action on top right of screen, and swipe down on screen content. On Android, going back is much easier. For Android 10 and newer, all you have to do is swipe from either side of the screen in, which always takes you back. Use the ubiquitous back button located in the bottom left corner of the screen for Android 9. Fourthly, primary call to action buttons. The main button for a page on iOS will typically be in the upper right corner. On Android, the page's main button will, however, frequently show up at the bottom right as a floating action button, or FAB. On occasion, the bottom navigation on iOS will show critical page actions. Apple likes to emphasize how much this differs from a tab bar, but come on. Similar to iOS, Android occasionally places significant activities at the top of the screen. Fifthly, search on iOS versus Android. Search is a ubiquitous control that is also incredibly flexible on both iOS and Android. Sometimes it serves as the main focus of the application, other times it serves more as an edge use case. And most of the time it falls somewhere in the between. As one might anticipate, there is some flexibility here across all platforms. Let's have a closer look of these facts. Search on iOS and Android differs in one respect. Press Cancel on iOS or on Android to end the search. Press X on iOS or X on Android to end the search but stay on the search screen. When search is a crucial feature, iOS and Android will show the search bar immediately away. Tapping the search bar will always open a completely other screen on these platforms. There are other areas where you can access search when it's not as important or common. On iOS, it's typical to see search listed as one of the main tabs or as an option in the top navigation bar. You can find it in the contextual actions on the top bar on Android as well. Sixthly, iOS and Android action menus. Any button on iOS can initiate an action menu, as can attempt to perform any action. They rise from the bottom, where they are conveniently graspable with the thumb. On Android, however, bottom sheets don't show up until you tap the kebab menu icon, which is the More Options icon. And only when there are numerous possible acts does something appear from the bottom. On action menus are standardized across both platforms. Context menus, a more recent iOS 13 feature, display related actions when you press and hold an element. The background is blurred while the context menu is displayed. On Android, numerous choices will also display right on the element. In more recent Android releases, the menu will obscure the actual kebab icon. Seventhly, selection controls. Use an iOS picker control to make decisions from a small number of possibilities. Pickers can appear anchored at the bottom or in line with the content. On Android, drop-down menus or modal dialogues, which appear centered and dark in the app background, are frequently used to list alternatives when there are limited options to choose from. On both iOS and Android, it's usual to see a specialized picker screen for lengthier lists of alternatives or when multi-selection is possible. One of the most rookie mistakes in mobile design is not allocating a complete screen to selecting a single option from a variety of available possibilities. 8. Date pickers. Date pickers on iOS have the same design as other picker controls, with the addition of a column for the day, month, and, if desired, the year. Android features a built-in date picking control. You can decide whether to add the year, whether to exclude it, or whether to let the user decide. Ninthly, tabs. It's important to note that iOS lacks a control that looks like tabs. Apple advises using a segmented button to switch between sister views instead. For the same display, an Android flat design style tab is used. Next, typography. Even while it's not required to set an Android or iPhone app in the system fonts, it's still a good idea to be aware of them in case you want to mimic the look of a native app. SF is the name of the system fonts on iOS. Its tiny form makes it readable at small sizes. Roboto is the name of the system font for Android. Despite being generally fairly similar to SF font, contains letter forms that are taller and have a little more area. Finally, icons. In iOS, your icon may eventually be used at other sizes as well, but if you design it at 60px, make sure it looks fine at 120x120, 180x180, and 1024x1024px as well. In Android, if you build a vector icon at 48x48 pixels, produce a separate version at 512x512 pixels and zoom in to 400% to make sure it still looks amazing. The minimum touch target for Android is 48x48 dp, while iOS is 44 times 44 part. To conclude, do we need to make separate apps for Android and iOS? In conclusion, no. Apple and Google will make UX mistakes like everyone else, but if they establish a design language for how their system should function by default, they are less likely to make egregious blunders. So, that's the end of this video. Next we will talk about grids in UI UX design. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it. See you in the next video and take care.